You know, holidays generally have in their origin a teachable moment. It's an opportunity for us to communicate to a new generation the meaning of significant events. So on the 4th of July, we teach our children to love America, to respect it, to learn its heritage and know its history. On Labor Day, we talk about the efforts of those who really have worked hard throughout our history. On Veterans Day, we're reminded of those who went a long way to give this country and other places a sense of freedom and liberty that was often threatened. And then there are our Christian holidays. Christmas, in which, in the midst of all the merriment, we occasionally pause to celebrate the birth of Christ. Good Friday, when we remember his death. And Easter Sunday, when we teach those who will follow us the brilliance of the resurrection. And a lot of times with those events, we have meals. And sometimes those meals are rather traditional in tone. The 4th of July has baseball, hot dogs, and apple pie. Thank you. I always would have substituted lemon or key lime, but you know how it goes. Thanksgiving, we have turkeys. The meal Jesus ate with his disciples the night before the crucifixion was one of those meals where they were looking back. The menu was prescribed. It was being partaken of by everybody in Israel that was observant on that night. And with every morsel of the meal, there was a memory. Remember when God passed over Israel in Egypt. Remember when we escaped through dry land over the sea. Remember when Moses got the commandments. It's a memory-making or memory-observant meal. And right in the middle of it, when they're eating the bread and drinking the wine, Jesus reinterprets it for all time, looks at his disciples and says, "This is my body, and this is my blood poured out for you. And every time you do this, remember me." That's a radical reorientation of that meal. Not just remember what God did with Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Moses and David, but remember me. Just exactly what did Jesus want them to remember about him? Whenever you do this, remember me. Well, how in the world could they have helped but remember the miracles? If you saw a man feed 5,000 people with a happy meal, would you remember it? If you saw a man walk to a tomb and say, "Come out, Lazarus," and Lazarus came out, would you remember it? If you watched a guy walk on water, would you remember it? I don't think he has to tell him to remember any of that stuff. I don't think I would ever forget that. Do you? But I think he's telling them something more. Whenever you eat this meal and drink this cup, do it in remembrance of me. What does he want them to remember? Here's what I think he wants them to remember. I think he wants them to remember that he gave every moment of his life, every thought that passed in his brain, every word that he ever spoke was done for them. Do you ever remind your children or grandchildren of people who've gone before them? Do you ever tell them family stories? Oh, your granddad did this. I do that with our boys because my father didn't live to see them. So over the years, I've told them stories. I knew one of my great-grandparents. I didn't know the other three, but I've heard of a fiery, red-headed temper one of my great-grandfathers had. Why did I hear that story? Well, that's part of passing the legacy on. And that's what Jesus is telling these guys. Whenever you eat this bread, whenever you drink this cup, I want you to remember that every moment of my life was poured out for you. I'd like to ask you to ponder one more question with me. And that is this. What would you like Jesus to remember about you? What would you like our Lord to remember about you? Is it the way you live selflessly, caring for others? Is it the way you're devoted through study and prayer? Is it the way you really are willing to give blood, sweat, and tears, that the world will be a better place and those who come after you will know the gospel of grace and truth? Do this in remembrance of me.